Welcome to Brave Inflections. My name is Claudelle von Eck. Thank you very much for visiting the website, or if you found this video on YouTube, thank you very much for watching. If you're watching this video, you're likely to be in a leadership position. Now, whether you're at mid-tier or senior executive or a board level in a small organization or a large organization, I hope that you'll be able to pick up a nugget or two that you'll be able to take back to your leadership team and have a conversation about. Or you may not yet be in a leadership position, but hopefully you'll be able to pick up a few things that you can remember for the future when you find yourself in a leadership position. I think the conversation that I want to have today in that is talking about the signs that leadership is failing within the organization is so important. There's so much more pressure on leaders these days. The world has become a lot more complex. We've got to deal with a lot of volatility. We have to deal with a lot of uncertainty that has a ripple effect into the organizations. And if leaders don't do what they should be doing properly, and that is to lead in the organization, that could have a significant adverse effect on the organization. But one must also think about the ripples that the effect of the ripples into society. The organization does not operate in isolation. It operates within the context of society, and it's important that the leaders understand that their responsibility does not just end within the organization. So, looking at these things that may destroy value within the organization is, I think, very, very important for us to do. So I'm just going to touch on a few examples of signs of a failing leadership. And I really encourage you that as you listen to the video um, that you do some introspection and reflect on your organization, and do your best not to go into defensive mode. Because this is typically what we tend to do is when we're confronted with something, we find justification for our position. So if you just listen with an open mind and with an honesty to yourself and to your organization, I hope that as I go through these signs, that you'll pick up a few things that you can reflect on as a team. So let me start with talking about an unethical culture. And so culture is so important. It doesn't matter how well structured your strategy is, how well you've communicated your strategy, how compelling your vision is. If the culture within the organization is not fit for that purpose, then you have a problem. But more importantly, right at the center, part of the DNA of the culture is that it should be an ethical culture. So, an unethical culture really is a sign of leadership not doing their job appropriately. And here, board members need to ask the right questions. And what are the things that we need to be looking out for in terms of signs that we may have an unethical culture within our organization. And if you browse through the website, you'll find some material that will help you with that and that reflection. But an unethical culture can destroy value within the organization very quickly. And as I said earlier on, organizations are not in isolation. So if value is destroyed within the organization, it may very well create destruction outside of the organization as well. So the responsibility of the leaders in terms of ensuring that there's an ethical culture within the organization really has far-reaching implications. So reflect about around how do we ensure, what measures do we have in place, what interventions do we have in place to ensure an ethical culture within our organization. Climate of fear is one of those telltale signs. Now, sometimes that climate of fear is created intentionally. Sometimes it's created unintentionally, right? So when it's created intentionally, it is typically these are created by leaders that that want to hide things, that are behaving from an unethical base, and they literally want to make sure that they rule by fear so that they can keep the power, and not be exposed. The other side of it is sometimes leaders are so not aware of what they are projecting, that self-awareness is not honed to the level where it should be in terms of the level of maturity that you would expect at leadership level. And they create and inadvertently create a climate of fear through their actions and the way they treat people. So it's not necessarily because they want to hide corruption or they want to hide fraud and they want to keep people away from certain spaces, but it is just because their level of empathy is fairly low, and they're completely unaware of how people are reacting to them. Now, why it's important for you to focus on that and make sure that you don't fall in that category of leaders is it stifles productivity in the organization. It creates a low staff morale. It also creates a culture of silence where people no longer want to bring ideas because they are afraid of how you would react. So important for us as leaders to reflect on what climate we're creating around us. So where your structures and your resources are not fit for purpose. And so it's one thing for you to be able to communicate with clarity what that strategy is. But if you don't give the people the resources they need in order for them to make that strategy, that vision a reality, or the structure is not fit for purpose, then you're creating a crisis within the organization. So it's important that leaders, when you're thinking about your strategy to support that vision and the purpose of the organization, that you have a very deep conversation around whether the structure that we've created and the resources that we've put in place are really fit for purpose. Because your structures can either support the vision, or it can really take away significantly from the value creation within the organization. Lack of agility is a big one. And here, I think, we need to start with self as leaders and ask ourselves, how flexible are we? At the time of recording, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think during this time, a lot of organizations have realized that they lack agility within the organization. Now, this is in the times that we're living in, with all the volatility and the uncertainty, the complexity that we have to deal with. This is a key area that leaders must focus on. How do we build agility within the organization, and then how do we make sure that we remain agile? I like to compare organizations to our body. And as we're growing older, we tend to become more stiff and less flexible, unless we continually exercise and also focus on the kinds of exercises that will ensure flexibility, right? So if you only do strength training, for example, your body may be strong, but it may not be flexible. Um, but if you need to continually, so you may want to add something like yoga to make sure that you remain flexible. And it's the same thing within organizations. It's not just about making sure that the organization is strong. It's not just making sure that the organization has stamina and passion, but it is also making sure that the organization remains flexible, and that's agile, your ability to morph into different spaces as the environment change around you, the organization's ability to constantly be open to what is happening in the environment, connect the dots, and then see how it translates back into the organization, and change where we need to change, and change fast enough so that we not be overtaken by events. A key one, I think, that is often an issue, and that is the leadership not dealing with the elephant in the room. And often the elephant in the room is in the leadership boardroom, um, or the executive boardroom. So this is really about making sure that we create a culture within the organization that people are not afraid to address issues that are value destructing within the organization. Right? So let me use this example. So if there's an executive team and there's one person in that executive team who is a narcissist, who is creating significant morale issues amongst the staff, who they may be a brilliant salesperson, but if you start to add the destruction that they're creating within the organization, they're actually a deficit to the organization, and it's not really a value adding resource for the organization. But then you find the rest of the executives are aware of the fact that they may be victimizing staff. They may be threatening staff, that in that leader's division, there's a significant climate of fear, but the rest of the executives keep quiet and they don't address it. So if you have a cancer growing in one side of the organization, it's very easy for that cancer to start to grow and spread in other areas because the rest of the staff is watching and they're looking at how the leadership's dealing with it and the leadership's not addressing it. It creates staff morale issues within the organization. Leadership not dealing with conflict, it's another one. And there are two extremes here for me. And the one extreme is leaders who are the creators of the conflict. And here I'm not talking about healthy conflict, because sometimes it is good to have that those healthy debates and different views and opposing views even. How we resolve those is the important factor in that. But I'm talking about unhealthy conflict. And so leaders who create unhealthy conflict, or leaders who, when there's conflict in the organization, in the manner in which they deal with the conflict, they're making it worse. The other extreme is leaders not addressing conflict at all. They just pretend it does not exist and hope that it will go away by itself. It will resolve by itself. And if we don't deal with the conflict and we don't deal with the conflict appropriately, what happens is it festers and then it becomes a big wound within the organization, and it can spread the cancer within the organization as well. Leadership isolated from reality is also a big issue. So when you're sitting at the top echelons and you're not making sure that you understand the realities on the ground, your ability to look through different lenses and understand the different realities, because there are always multiple realities playing out in the organization, makes it more difficult for leaders to make truly informed decisions and making the right decisions for the organization. And then a big one for me as well is a disconnect between the tone at the top and the walk in the middle. So the board is saying the right things, like they want to make sure that there's an ethical culture, encouraging the people in the organization to live ethically, to do their, in terms of exercising their mandate in the organization, to do so ethically. They might make sure that at board level, governance is top notch. But they think that by saying the right things and even doing the right things, that it naturally would translate throughout the whole organization. So unless there are interventions and feedback loops in the organization, you could very well find yourself with a disconnect between what is being said at the top and what is really happening within the organization. And studies have shown that often there is that disconnect, that the leaders at the top think that because everything is honky-dory at their level, that everything is honky-dory at the level of the all levels within the organization. And then the last one is incompetence. And here I would like to emphasize, I'm not just talking about technical competence, because often organizations tend to hire people based on technical competence, and they don't look at the other aspects of leadership that is so important. So if we don't make sure that when we're recruiting people for leadership positions, that they are mature, that the leadership competencies are there, you will find that the wrong leadership would be practiced within the organization, and I'm putting leadership in inverted commas there, and the leadership would then fail, and you could find the organization in crisis. Right, so these are just a few things. It's of course not all the kinds of things that create crises in the organization or leadership failures within the organization, but I wanted to just give you a few things to think about. And as I said right at the beginning, so reflect on them honestly with yourself. Think about it with an open mind. Look for those signs within your own organization, and have the conversation with your leadership team so that you can build a strong organization. Leadership is so important, but we need good leadership. We need leaders that lead appropriately and effectively within the organization. So just quickly, a little bit about Brave Inflections. Now, focus here is really on leadership, governance, ethics, change management. We give strategic advice, culture turnarounds, facilitation, and really around those strategic conversations that executives, leaders have, board members have, training in those spaces of leadership, governance, and ethics. Executive coaching, it's a favorite of mine because puts me in a position where I can help leaders through those inflection points that they may find themselves in, but also specifically people on an accelerated route in terms of leadership and being accelerated into leadership positions within the organization, and then also conference keynotes. With that, I thank you very much. Thank you for coming to watch this video. I hope you've been able to find some value in what I've said, and go look at the rest of the website. There are lots of other nuggets on the website. Subscribe to the website. If you subscribe to the website, you'll automatically be notified every time we add something new to the website. Thank you very much for watching.